Bienvenue, karibuni, namkelekile, and welcome, viewers, to this pre-recorded program titled What's Next for the Congo, presented by the Connecticut World Affairs Council. I am Lwazi Bululu, a global fellow here at the Council, and I had the pleasure and honor to speak with His Excellency George Nzongola-Ntalaja. Professor Nzongola is Professor Emeritus at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill and is a career scholar, career activist, and career diplomat from the Congo. He previously served as the permanent representative of the Democratic Republic of the Congo to the United Nations from 2022 until 2023. Before his posting, he had been professor in the Department of African, African American, and Diaspora Studies at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill since 2007. He was also a participant in 1991 at the Congolese Sovereign National Conference as one of its 7 scholars of international renown. Professor Nzongola was also a diplomatic advisor to Prime Minister Etienne Tshisekedi from 1992 to 1993, and first vice president of the National Election Commission in 1996, and also went on to serve various roles in the UN system, including at the United Nations Development Programme. He has contributed to many scholarly journals and publications, and is also the author of one of the most impressive chronicles, in my opinion, of the history of the Congo and the struggle for liberation. It's titled The Congo, From Leopold to Kabila, A People's History, published in 2002 by Z Books. So before we jump into the conversation I had with the professor, which you're about to hear, I first chatted with him, where he explained to me a bit of the history of the Democratic Republic of Congo and how we got to here so that we could have the conversation of where we go. It is in that conversation that he reminded me that this year would be 100 years since Patrice Lumumba was born, the first Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo, and a truly free Congo. In this conversation, he also centered his explanations on a particular pattern he had noticed, and that is one of external actors with vested interests in the Congo, advancing those interests and co-opting the country, its army, and its resources, and ultimately jeopardizing the country's future and the future of its people. This is a pattern we've seen repeated throughout its history, starting from King Leopold's Belgium and Congo Free State and its exploitation of its resources, through the West buttressing dictatorial regimes of Mobutu, and through the alliance of democratic states after the First and Second Congo Wars, influencing the Congolese military in the late 90s and early 2000s. And so it was the recognition of this pattern that led me to ask the first question in our conversation, which you'll hear right now. I think one of the things you touched on was, and I think you write this in your book, a system of personal rule with external backing has been at the heart of the DRC, and the struggles against that type of rule have been at the heart of the fight for liberation in Congo, whether that is the agents that worked for Leopold and his Belgium to take resources from the Congo, whether that was Mobutu, him being supported by various international interests while disenfranchising his own people. And then you have, before the first, well, after the first Congo War, the external backers of Laurent Desire Kabila, them sort of using their influence to craft, their own policies and what they wanted to get out of the Congo. You see that throughout the history. My question to you is, whether you see that happening again, especially with the likes of, perhaps China or the US trying to get involved in the peacemaking process, but only if they can secure their own, interests or get something out of it, mainly the resource wealth of the Congo. So how do you see that playing out? Parties like the US and Donald Trump or China trying to get involved in the peacemaking process only to get, something out of it from the Congo in terms of resources.
Yes, the United States has always been interested in Congo's minerals since 1945,
Mhm.
when the United States did develop the first atomic bomb, the bomb that President Truman laid on Hiroshima and Nagasaki in Japan. And they even told the Belgians never to continue extracting that uranium from
Mhm.
Shinkolobwe, which is the high quality uranium, and they wanted to have control over that uranium. And this continued until even during the Congolese independence period. And of course, they were heavily involved in mining in the Congo, especially in Katanga, in Tenga Fungurume, and so on. And yet they sold these uh, minerals to the Chinese. And now they are saying that, well, we don't like the idea that the Chinese are controlling everything. They want to come back in. Well, President Tshisekedi has asked them to come in because he believes that they would provide security to our country. We still do not know exactly what's going to happen. We have seen now the agreement uh, made by Rwanda and Congo with the American Secretary of State, in which calls for Rwanda having a great deal to do with our minerals and our rivers and lakes and our national parks and so on. Uh, I don't think it's really a good idea if that is the case. Although the President Tshisekedi has said he's not going to give in any inch of Congolese property to Rwanda, but we don't know exactly what's going to be done, and it's going to create a problem because Rwanda has committed crime after crime against the Congo, and now they're going to be compensated for their brutality and the killing of so many people. We don't think that is the right thing to do. They are the one to pay reparations to the Congo for what we have done to our country in the last 30 years. So this is a major problem. I hope that our leaders in the Congo will understand how important this is, and they will not really give up our resources to Rwanda.
Mhm. That's, yeah, a very good point. And excuse me, and related to that is my other question of peacemaking within the continent. And essentially my question I have is like, why can't we as Africans keep peace on the continent without external backing? We talked about the Sun City agreements. Um, we saw even in the Congo, we had the Southern African Development Community mission to the DRC. They
Mm,
removed their mandate because they had become ineffective. We have
mm,
seen members leaving ECOWAS, Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger. And
mm,
ECOWAS had usually a great role in not only economic development, but peacekeeping in West Africa and trying to ensure democratic backsliding did not happen. We're seeing people don't like the ineffectiveness of those supranational organizations on the continent in keeping peace, making peace, and ensuring development. Why is that the case? Why have we found that those institutions, the AU, the ECOWAS, the Eastern African Community, why have they not been able to sort of rein in these these powers that want not necessarily make war, but want to be disruptive? Why hasn't the East African Community reined in Rwanda from exploiting the Congo, for instance? Why
mm.
is there that sort of inefficiency?
Well, if you followed the major summits that took place in Tanzania, with the SADC group and the East African group. You saw that in those two meetings, and then of course the African Union itself later on, not a single African leader condemned Rwanda for what it's been doing in the Congo for the last few years. Not a single one, you see. And we were surprised that the president of Angola, who was the mediator in the conflict, was pushing for the Congolese government to negotiate with the M23. Now, these are, bandits, the people who are killing their own country, if all of them are Congolese, but I'm sure that some of them are not Congolese. But then we can understand that. And why is it no one gives, condemns Kagame for what he's been doing in the Congo for the last few years? And of course, Kagame is also supported by Western powers who give him lots of arms, who give him money, who help the French and Italians and Germans for their gas investments in Mozambique and all of that. And we have African Union is useless because here we have an organization, but it depends so much on the European Union. 80% of the programs of the African Union are financed by the European Union, where we have countries that have enormous wealth, the Congo, Equatorial Guinea, Nigeria, South Africa, and so many others. And why can't we spend any little money? We have in Addis Ababa, the building of the African Union was built by the Chinese. The building for the Africa Security Organization was built by the Germans. And can't a little country like Equatorial Guinea give all the money that the Chinese gave or the German gave for them to build this thing by Africans? So it is a major problem that there is no commitment to the ideals of Kwame Nkrumah, Patrice Lumumba, and other great leaders of Africa who were looking for the working together of all these these countries to work together to make sure that we have our sovereignty, we have our economic independence, and so on. No, we want, look at our countries. How many, since we have had independence, we've created new businesses? Nothing at all. We always have foreigners to come to do things for us. But we have so many engineers, so many doctors, so many people, people who have gone to universities, have a lot of knowledge and so on. We are not using them properly. This is the major problem of Africa as a whole.
Mm. It's a very powerful and salient point that you do make about terms the potential that is there. A fact that I always use is whereas other countries around the world are seeing, decreasing numbers of
Exactly. Look at countries.
birth rates, and so like Africa is the youngest continent. There's a great potential for innovation to be.
Well, let me just give you another example. At the independence in 1960, our country had 10% of the gross domestic product was of industrial production. That was exactly the same as Canada in 1960. We were at the same level. We
Of
were
industrialization.
yes, we were way ahead of South Korea and Indonesia, Malaysia, Today, they are way, way ahead of us. Uh, they were way, way behind us, behind Ghana. Ghana was way up, developed and so on. We have nothing, compared to these other countries in Asia. So this is the problem that we have a leadership, the leaders, but leaders who wanted to do things. I don't know if you've read the book by Susan Williams called White Malice.
And no, I don't believe I have.
You got to read this book. Uh, this woman, Susan Rice, Susan Williams,
Susan Williams, yeah.
Susan Williams is a British historian.
Mm,
She has White Malice, the CIA, and the covert recolonization of Africa
mm.
by a British historian.
Scholar.
And this is the whole book is about two countries, Ghana and the DRC.
Mm,
And what does she say? The United States and Britain did everything to make it sure that Nkrumah should not succeed. That's how,
mm,
he became prime minister and then president later from 1957.
mm.
In 1966, he was kicked out by the
The coup.
soldiers,
Yes.
this country who were trained in Britain. And so this was because Nkrumah wanted to develop nuclear energy. He didn't want to develop nuclear weapons, nuclear energy to be able to provide electricity to all of his people and to have industrialization of the country and so on. And the Americans didn't want any black people having access to nuclear power. The same Americans who didn't want blacks to have them, they one who helped South Africa to create nuclear weapons. And of course, when independence came to South Africa in 1994, Mandela agreed to destroy all of the nuclear weapons of South Africa. Because for the whites, blacks should not have nuclear weapons, but blacks should have them. And these are the blacks who were racist, who were killing people, and so on. You see, and then in the case of Congo, the Lumumba's story. He was a man who was very, very committed to sovereignty and to economic independence, to use the numerous resources of the Congo to improve the living conditions of Congolese people. The Belgians and Americans didn't like that, and they killed him. So this is the problem we have in Africa. And read the Susan Williams book is excellent because it just gives you these two countries. They are very, very important in understanding what's happening in Africa as a whole.
Also, definitely. No, I think that's why it's pleasure speaking with people like you who have an academic background because you lead me down a path like a book. Like read this, you'll learn more, and that's what I appreciate. So yeah, definitely, it's on my summer reading list for sure. Um, to change gears a bit, you speak about the National Electoral Commission in 1996, and in the book, I love the quote. You say you observed the bankruptcy of the Kengo government, the incompetence of the opposition leadership, and the cynicism of representatives in the international community. Those three words, bankruptcy, incompetence, and cynicism.
Mhm.
And I found those very, very powerful, but also very accurate sometimes in describing the situation you have in some African countries in terms of that lack of strong moral and political leadership.
Mhm.
Um, and so I feel like we've already touched upon that, but I want to focus on like the cynicism in the international community. You have represented your country at the highest level of international diplomacy and politics at the UN. Did you, my question is simply, forgive me for being maybe a bit young and naive, but did you see the cynicism? Because young people always feel like the UN does not have any teeth, that at the supranational level, above national government, nothing really gets done. There's no form of enforcement power. Did you see that, or did you feel like there actually were things that could be done at that level? Did you have optimism, or were you confronted with more cynicism?
No, I know the UN very well. See, I had worked in the United Nations for 10 years.
Mm.
From 1997 to 2007, so 10 years.
At the UNDP, of course, yes.
Yeah, I was at the UN. Well, first worked as a consultant for 3 years,
Mhm.
and then 7 years as a UNDP officer. 2 years in Nigeria as advisor to the federal government of Nigeria. 3 years as director of the United Nations uh, Governance Center in Norway, in Oslo, Norway, for 3 years, and then 2 years in New York to set up an institute on governance in Africa, which was requested by African governments. And I was the person to set up that institute in Dakar. I did going back and forth between New York and Dakar. And so I know the system. I know how those people don't really believe in what they say. They are there to, well, they do provide some support in terms of health and in terms of looking after the poor and so on, since our governments don't do that job and they're doing it. But generally, they are very cynical. They don't really believe it. Now, when I went, so I asked President Tshisekedi when he asked me what job I wanted. I said, I want to go to the United Nations because I know that system. And I'm very happy of my main achievement was that I was able to end the blockade against heavy weapons for our country. For years, we could not sell and buy anything unless we have the goodwill of the United Nations. The Security Council had to look at everything we want to buy and say yes or no, we can buy or we can't buy. So I got to UN in January 2022. By December of that year, the Security Council removed the
Okay.
blockage, and it was my major achievement at the UN system. And because I was working with all of these ambassadors, I told them exactly what I thought. I told them that this was not acceptable, and so finally by December 2022 they removed it. It
Mm.
was the little Rwanda next to they could buy anything, had the most sophisticated weapon, satellite and everything, and we couldn't buy anything, but was really important for our security. And but of course I don't know whether our system improved after that. But anyway, I did achieve that.
Yeah. No, and I think honestly, this is it's a great achievement because in my mind, I think it goes beyond just being able to buy weapons, but the ability to exercise sovereignty and be able to defend yourself.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, I think that's the importance of it. And yeah, congratulations on that. And I'm sure it probably did play a bit of a role in, sort of ensuring that more devastation did not happen, I think,
Mm.
especially in this most recent conflict. Um, yeah. Um, I also honestly do want to touch on, as you mentioned, I think at the heart of this conflict are people, and an immense amount of human suffering. Over 1 million people displaced, 7,000 lo have lost their lives just in since January alone.
Mm-hmm.
And I I would love for you to just give insight into, the devastation of this conflict, as that as someone who's from there, that's a place you call home. And besides all the political analysis and stuff, there's an emotional aspect when you see, part your home being devastated like that. And I think these days we're so numb to war and conflict that we don't really let it affect us as much as we can. So if you could just help us, recognize the scale of human devastation as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I mean, what we need is really leaders who was really committed to move our countries forward and not to continue. How can you believe that we have been independent for 65 years and we haven't really improved the living condition of our people? Most people do not have clean water. We don't have roads in the country. Uh, most people don't have electricity. And yet we have people, countries like Ghana. You go to Ghana, you see there are, lights all over the place, you know, in villages all over the place and so on. Why can't we do the same? We have more resources. We can do better than Ghana. And yet why can't we do that? So it is a problem of the fact that most of our governments have not done well in terms of looking after the people. They look after themselves. There are people who are more interested in getting rich, and getting, uh, their own, have a nice life and so on. And yet, the fun thing is that most of our leaders, when they die, they lose everything, because they put all this money in America or in Europe, and these these banks in these countries will not release the money. They keep it. So we keep giving money to the Europeans and Americans. It simply that makes no sense. Chombe, his family got nothing out of his wealth. Mobutu, the same thing. Yeah, and it might happen to the other leaders, and so it just doesn't make any sense that they should be doing this. Why don't we invest in a country? Why don't we, put in factories? Do kind of things, but are going to send our country forward and so on. So it is a major, major problem.
Mhm.
Why we don't do what we can do with our resources and our skills. I mean, we have some of the most, well-educated people in the world, and who can do all of these things, and yet they are not. And of course, we have medical doctors who are paid very little, salaries. We have university professors who want to pay anything worth it, and so on. But why? When people who work in the government get huge salaries, people in our parliament, we don't even know what is the salaries. People say 21,000 a month. We don't know if that's true or not. But it's simply mind-boggling.
Yeah, definitely. No, yeah, you paint a good picture of how bad governance and underdevelopment itself can
Mm,
actually be a crime against people and a crime against humanity,
yes.
with the conditions that people live in. And honestly, you could have a longer discussion about kleptocracy,
Mm,
and that being in the rise, and talk about Fanon and his predictions about
mm,
African leadership. But I think, that would be a greater conversation for another time. But as we are approaching the end here, we like to sort of give the final word to our guest. So, are there any sort of salient words of wisdom or that you can leave us with before we wrap things up, or final remarks you have?
Well, the most important thing is that we need to change our government in a way that the people who work for the government are people who are committed to improving the living conditions of our people. That is the number one thing that our government have to do. That when people come to power, they have to think, first of all, what can they do to make sure that children don't die? We have most of our children die before the age of 5. Let's stop that. Let's make sure that we have good hospitals and clinics that are available to give people all the support. And of course, improve our environment. Our environment is bad, is full of lots of problems.
Absolutely.
Look at Kinshasa. The city is filthy and so on, and many people die because kids have got to play in places which are not good, and so on. So we have to make sure that we have hygiene and we have people eat something that is really good and so on. All of these are very, very important. If we don't do them, we're not going to go anywhere.
So, thank you so much
Pleasure.
for that and for your words. And yeah, as I say, I'm sure we all hope that from this ceasefire we can actually get to a lasting peace for the Congo and the Great Lakes region, and also just for development and for the improvement for people's lives. Um,
Okay.
and I know I remember when I first reached out to you about talking to the Congo, you said all your professional life since 1970, talking about the Congo and Africa, things you've never refused to address. And I want to thank you for that, for remaining committed to the fight, to say that the world needs more people like yourself who stay committed to the cause. And so thank you very much, and thank you for educating us here today. Thank you to our viewers for joining and for listening. If you enjoy this recorded program, please stay engaged. Go to our website at ctwac.org, that's ctwac.org, to see a full list of our upcoming events. And if you're willing and able, consider becoming a member of the World Affairs Council to support the work that we do to bring the world to you. So that is all. Thank you very much.